I organize in the 33rd and 34th districts. 34th is West Seattle, so yay. And I recently got into the political sphere because largely of my mother, who, like these women standing next to me, is a role model for me because she showed me it's always important to believe in yourself and to stand up for what's right. My mom's a first-generation American, and she graduated UC Berkeley and was hired in 1980 with the U.S. Forest Service, and was among the only women she would work for in a male-dominated field for years. And she stood out as a female forester. She went from tree tagger to park ranger, district manager, and eventually forest supervisor. And then it doesn't stop, sorry, which is great. And then she eventually was the director of all lands for Washington, Oregon State. Wow. And then was eventually, they made her have her own title because she's so special, the head of organizational learning and culture for the entire agency. So,
wow.
Very impressive, yeah. I would say her biggest accomplishment was to develop the first set of agency core values for the Forest Service, and her hope was to connect everyone in the agency from the laborers and the tree taggers all the way to the board and senior staff. And it was really inspiring to see my mom, one of the only female heads of decision making for the federal agency, to transform the Forest Service from the inside out. One of the most important conservation agencies on the planet. Yeah, so in this way, she kind of taught me and inspired me to remember that you don't always have to wait for opportunities, but you can create your own out of thin air. And you need to be passionate about the things you care about, and also stand up to people who think that you can't do the job. And just like my mom, Patty Murray, and Minnie Timmeraju are living examples of, pardon my language, but badass women doing what they know is right, standing up for themselves and getting the job done. So I want to introduce the president of NARAL, Minnie Timmeraju, to thank you for what you've already done with us, and to give you my and our support going forward and spreading awareness about the issues that really matter and that we all care about as Democrats. You've been campaigning for, I think, over 20 years, which is about as long as I've been alive. Very impressive.
Oh, it means I'm old.
You've been pioneering women's rights, and it's really an inspiration to have you here, so I'll pass it. So
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. Your mom must be really proud of you. You said her greatest accomplishment was the Forest Service work, but you're probably on the list too. I'm also first generation American who went to UC Berkeley, so
no, really?
Yeah.
Wow. There you go.
And I actually started college right around the time you were elected to the Senate. So I've been following your career my whole life. What I'll say is, look, you already know this. I've been in, I think, 5 states in 9 days. I know we say every election is the most important election, and you're probably tired of hearing it, but this is the first election we've had, in this state at least, where, we've had a few specials, right? But the first election, the first midterms, after we lost a fundamental freedom, a fundamental constitutional right that we took for granted and we assumed we had covered. And so many of you have worked on this issue way longer than I have with the senator and have been in the trenches. So first I want to thank you, and I want to promise you we will not give up this fight. That's why we're here today, and the senator we're here to support. I love the pro-choice Patty signs, pro-choice, pro-Patty.
Well, some of them say pro-choice, pro-Patty, pro-coffee, which is
yes, I need that too. We're going to have a round of coffee after this, because I need a cup. I want you to know, you've seen the ads, you know her, but I need to tell you some, a little bit of background of what we've been dealing with in Washington. So, post-Dobbs, it's been rough. I feel like, our opposition has never been more extreme, frankly, outrageous, and our Senate Democratic leadership has been incredibly steadfast, clear-eyed, unequivocal, that not only will we not back down, we won't just fight to protect the status quo, we're going to fight for the best, most audacious policy set of solutions possible. So that's not just row the day before Dobbs fell. Sorry to take a stab at one of your colleagues, but we got a lot of well-intentioned Democrats who are trying to make compromises, but I'll tell you something. This is not a time to compromise. We're not going to compromise with women's lives, right? This is not the time. This is the time. We've never had more Americans be aware of the stakes with abortion and contraception and reproductive health technologies like IVF ever in the history of this country. There was a poll recently that said 97% of Americans are aware of the fight on abortion. That means they've seen it in the news, they've had a conversation. That's mind-boggling. We've been fighting this fight our whole lives, but now suddenly the majority of Americans, we always knew based on polling were with us, are actually turning out and fighting back. Our membership grew to 4 million this year. It was stunning, right? Our organizations are all, getting members and activists engaged at a higher level than we've ever seen before. Every state I've been to has had surges in voter registration of women and young people. And when we're knocking on the doors, we're hearing it on the doors, we're seeing the energy. So I'll say, don't listen too much to the latest polls. Listen to what folks are saying on the ground. Look at the data of who's asking for vote by mail ballots. Look at the data of who's registering in your state. That's how we know the energy is on our side. But I want to go back to not compromising. Your Senator, Patty Murray, has been the tip of the spear in the U.S. Senate, making sure Senate Democrats do not compromise on our rights and our freedoms. And it's so incredibly important that we not just re-elect her because she's an incredible legislator, but because she is the moral conscience of the Senate. She is keeping everyone focused and aware. And we desperately need her back so we can get this job done. And I know you all know that, but I want you to hear that from me. I'm from Texas. And I know. And it's been really hard for me to watch what's happening in my home state. And the only way we stop it is by holding the House, holding the Senate, adding 2 colleagues so she can drive that caucus to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, take further bold action on a host of other legislation I know you've introduced that would protect women from traveling, protect women's data privacy, protect people from disinformation. It's an incredible package of bills. We're so close. And you have the leader right here. You can help women and men and pregnant people and families all across the country by sending Patty Murray back to Congress. So back to the Senate. So that's why I'm here on this rainy day. I'm thrilled to be here. And I want to ask you to join us.
Thank you. He's done a great job here. And to Minnie, who flew all the way out here to Washington, D.C., and she just said to me, well, of course, it should be raining in Seattle. I said, no, this is the first time.
I'm kind of enjoying it, though. It's been weirdly hot
We
everywhere
are
else
all
in the country.
loving it, and not just because we're from Seattle, but because we have had smoke-filled skies
Yes.
for days, and finally we're all breathing a little bit better. So
Yes.
welcome, and we're so glad to be here, and we all are so proud of the job Minnie's doing nationally to help organize and have people understand you don't give up, you fight back, and when it comes to women's rights, we are not giving up.
That's
So
right.
Minnie, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm gonna really, I got to see so many friends and people, and it was just awesome. It's great to see you all out here. Thank you for being at my back in this critical election. I can't tell you how much it means to me to have you here, to have you calling friends, to telling people to vote, to telling them why this election is so important. Minnie just talked about the issue that so many people are asking me about, and that's what's going to happen with women and the right to choose. Like all of you, I was so stunned. Although I've been in DC fighting for all of you, I've seen them attack this from every which way. But when they overturned Roe, my heart dropped because I knew the impact it was going to have on women and their health and their choices and their opportunities and the ability to make their own healthcare decision with their own family and their own doctor and their own faith, not be dictated to by politicians. To me, this is such a simple thought. Why should politicians decide the issue of choice? So to me, this election is really important, and I want to thank all of you for being here, being pro-coffee, pro-Patty, all of it. I appreciate it. And I will just tell you, Minnie's right. Since this happened, I've been out on the Senate floor. I introduced the Women's Protection Act, which will codify Roe, so that women across the country in every state will have the access again to the reproductive health care they need. But I didn't stop. I went out on the Senate floor and I tried to pass legislation to assure that if somebody tried to travel from their state to a state where it was still legal, that they would not be punished. And the Republicans blocked that.
Yes.
Capturing women in their own states for health care. I was stunned and astonished. I thought, at least they'll do that. No. I tried to pass a bill to make sure that doctors, providers who provide reproductive care could not be arrested. Why? Because I was over in Spokane at the Planned Parenthood. We have providers there who live a few miles away in Idaho, and they were concerned that if they came to work in Spokane, did their job, they'd get arrested when they went home. So I tried to pass legislation to assure that providers would not get arrested if they provided an abortion in a state where it's legal. They blocked us from doing that. That is astonishing to me. And we didn't stop. Minnie's right. We're trying to make sure that people can't track women on apps who are trying to travel to another state. Let me make this real for you. They are trying to track women who go from Texas to California to a Planned Parenthood facility using their iPhones to track where you've been. And if you've been parked in a Planned Parenthood lot for a little bit of downtime and go back home to Texas, they've been tracking you. So we are trying really hard to block that. Elizabeth Warren is the lead on this in the Senate. We have to protect people's privacy. This is what we've come down to. But I assure you, if we can get 2 more votes in the Senate, we will pass women's protective law, access so that women in this country have the protections that they have had for 50 years. And that is on the line in this election. Now, I've had several of you say to me, why aren't Democrats talking about what they've done? Well, I would love to tell you everything we've done. In a year and a half, what we have done. And we passed the American Rescue Plan so that businesses would be reopened and our kids would be back in school and we would distribute vaccines equitably. We passed that without one Republican vote. And my opponent's out there saying she wouldn't have voted for it. She's complaining kids were in school, but she would not have supported the resources to get our schools open and so much more. We passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill. I came across this morning on the West Seattle Bridge. Forever, it was like whistling across. Amazing. Well, that doesn't happen on its own. It happens because we work to build our infrastructure. And there's so many projects that are now going to happen for roads and bridges and highways and ports and broadband, because we learned in the pandemic if you don't have equitable access to broadband, you can be left behind. We're fixing that in this country, and I was proud that we got that done. And of course, we passed the PACT Act. Are there any veterans here? Several. Yay. Thank you. Thank you for your service. And we passed the PACT Act, which I've been working on for a long time, to assure that if someone served our country and was exposed to toxics, they would get the benefits they needed. Mitch McConnell tried to block that on the floor. We stood up to him, embarrassed the heck out of him, and we passed it so our veterans would get the guarantee. And we passed the CHIPS Act so that people would be able to, we hear about inflation, we feel it, we see it, it is really hard. But one of the reasons we are under this is because shipping was blocked. Most of our chips come from China. Every product we buy, whether it's our car or our cell phone or kids' toys or I don't know, everything has chips in it today. And we were relying on foreign countries for those chips. Well, we passed the CHIPS Act, and now we are going to be manufacturing those chips right here in Washington State, right here in America, and we won't be relying on somebody else to make that. And of course, the Inflation Reduction Act, for the first time, lowering prescription drugs. For anybody here who's on Medicare, we're going to be negotiating with the pharmaceuticals to lower your costs using the bulk power of America. Finally, I've been fighting this forever. We're going to lower prescription drug costs and cap insulin at $35 a month and so much more. We are lowering costs on health care. And to all of us, we understand climate here. We've been living through these forest fires. We passed the biggest investment in climate action in the history of our country. So we can build that new energy that we need here in the United States and export it to other countries, but it will lower energy costs and reduce pollution. And we all know why that's so important here. So this is on the line. And finally, let me just say, reproductive rights are on the line, so is our democracy.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I want to add this. I was in the Capitol on January 6th. I saw up close and personal people who were trying to use brute force to take over our democracy. We can never let that happen. We have to pass voting rights. We have to assure Americans that we use our votes and our voices to make this democracy stand. Every one of you that is here is helping our democracy be a democracy by using your vote and your voice and talking to other people about voting in this election. I want to make sure we send a message across the country that we are a country that believes in a democracy, not in presidents who try and take over an election with brute force, and not by being election deniers. So we are at the forefront here. We're going to send that message across the country. By being here today, you are working to make sure that we keep our country a democracy, and that we work to protect women's rights, and we work to continue to rebuild our country. That's what's so important. So thank you all for being here, but don't just come here, tell your neighbors, tell your friends, make sure we vote. We are a democratic state if people vote, and this is a critical election. So thank you all for being here. Thanks for the work you're doing. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being on my back. I can't wait to get back to work for all of you and fight for all of you again. Thank you.
Thank you.